Making a spring wreath. This is a rope form from Dollarama. Use some leftover foam or waterproof floral foam. You can cut these with scissors or an X-Acto knife. Place the foam onto the wreath form with some hot glue. Hold it in place for a bit. Then reinforce it with 2 outdoor zip ties. Make sure the zip tie ends are not on the very back to prevent scratching the door or wall. I put them down a little bit from the outer edge. Snip off the ends. I bought dollar store tulips and foam eggs for this. Snip off excess length with wire cutters. And I had a plastic tube over the tulip stem that I pulled off. I separated the tulip from the leaves to use separately, and shortened the leaf stems as well. I placed the eggs approximately where I wanted them and shortened their stems as well. And removed the plastic outer edge on these stems too with some scissors. Hot glue the wire stems and poke them into the foam. Generally, always use floral stems in odd numbers for better eye appeal. Pay attention to any foam accessories to make sure that defects face the back of the wreath. Now add your tulips or whichever florals you'd like. I place them on top to arrange them to see how I want them before permanently placing them. I use an old dotting tool to poke holes into the foam because the tulip stems are only plastic. But you can use a bamboo skewer to do this too. Hot glue the stems and poke them into the foam. After all are placed, I add a bit more hot glue around the stems to hold it in place. Now I'm adding the leaves around the florals and eggs. Hot gluing these stems as well. The plastic grass has a square bottom edge, so I trim them into a point for easier insertion. Now for the wreath sign. I used watered down brown acrylic paint for a wood stain look. Brush strokes should go the same direction as the wood grain. And paint the outer edges and the back as well. Now for the sign lettering. I print this on computer paper with my laser printer in mirror image. You can only do this with a laser printer. Then I use Mod Podge to adhere it face down onto the wood. And it'll have to stay on the wood for 12 hours to fully set. Center it on the wood. Now add jute rope to the back to fasten the plaque onto the wreath. I use Goop exterior glue for permanent hold, but E6000 is excellent too. I use some scrap fabric to hold the rope to the back. Goop glue in the center of the fabric. And I place them on the center of the plaque back. Then I use hot glue on the outer edges for temporary hold because the goop glue takes 12 hours to set. Now I tie the plaque on top of the foam. I use 3 knots. I add hot glue on top of the knots for extra reinforcement. Now I'm making a rag bow to add to the bottom. I cut several various ribbons to approximately 1 yard, which is 1 meter, on each length. You can use ribbon, pearls, raffia, scrap fabric, or lace to make these ribbon lengths. Many of these I get at dollar stores. You also can adjust the length of your size of the bow according to how you want it. I also added 4 rows of raffia because it is quite narrow compared to the ribbon. All your strips don't have to be exact same length. It'll make it look more rustic if they aren't perfect. Stack them all atop of each other in a row. Then fold them in half to determine the approximate center. Then fold one side to make a loop to the center. Then the second loop to the center again. I then fold the bow in half to make sure my bow loops are the same length on each side. I then use a zip tie or a piece of aluminum wire to secure the bow in the middle. Before I get it tight, I double check my left and right loops are the same size again. Then I snip off the excess zip tie. Now I fluff up the bow loops and arrange them how I want to see them. Now I poke a hole under the wreath for a zip tie to hold the bow on. But if you use wire for tying your sign on, though, you can use it to tie the bow on instead. Next time I'll do that because this was quite tricky to get it on this way. And then cut off the excess zip tie ends, making sure it's facing downwards again too. After this video, I also added some extra small white flowers to the wreath as well. Now to trim the ribbon ends to a dovetail shape. Fold the ribbon in half and cut it into a V. With any polyester ribbons, I mount the edges quickly with a lighter to prevent it from fraying. Now I used about 1 yard of jute to make the hanger rope. Tie a slip knot on the ends. Carefully place this in the center of the wreath. I hot glue the knot so it is hidden behind the wreath as well. After the video ended, I added those small white flowers to the wreath as well to fill in the gaps, and hot glued moss on the foam to hide the foam as well. This is the next day. I take a damp sponge and wet the paper to remove it. I accidentally top coated it with Mod Podge and it was hard to get off, but the paper eventually comes off. Unfortunately though, with my extra scrubbing, some of the print lifts off too. If you have a Cricut, you could always use that for your lettering as well. I painted over the writing afterwards that was missing to fix it. It was an easy fix. After it dried, I saw a bit of paper remain, so I gently scrubbed it some more. After all the paper was off, I top coated it with varnish for exterior use. If outdoors, also spray the flowers with waterproof outdoor shoe spray.